Good evening. We'll start with an opening prayer. Thank you, Lord, for these few minutes to discuss these ideas. May they help us be more fulfilled, lead more enriched lives, and in doing so have that loving feeling and sacredness of the every day, every night that we experience spill over and spill over to touch those that are in our hearts and minds, all now harm-free. In the name of Jesus, amen. We are continuing with Seth Speaks. We are in chapter 22, and it is titled A Goodbye and an Introduction. Aspects of multidimensional personality as viewed through my own experience, which is Seth, who's being channeled by Jane Roberts. And we have moved along into this chapter, and we'll be picking it up where it says now, but he has a lot of nows. I guess the best way to say it is right before the pause at 11:51, the paragraph before that. It says, "Now I began by telling you that I was dictating this material through the auspices of a woman of whom I was quite fond. Let me now tell you that there are other realities involved. The following paragraphs will be written by another personality who stands relatively in the same position to me as I stand to the woman through whom I am now speaking." All right. So here comes another personality known as Seth 2. "We are the voices who speak without tongues of our own. We are sources of that energy from which you come. We are creators, yet we have also been created. We seeded your universe as you seed other realities. We do not exist in your historical terms, nor have we known physical existence. Our joy created the exaltation from which your world comes. Our existence is such that communication must be made by others to you. Verbal symbols have no meaning to us. Our experience is not translatable. We hope our intent is. In the vast infinite scope of consciousness, all is possible. There is meaning in each thought. We perceive your thoughts as lights. They form patterns. Because of the difficulties of communication, it is nearly impossible for us to explain our reality. Know only that we exist. We send immeasurable vitality to you and support all of those structures of consciousness with which you are familiar. You are never alone. We have always sent emissaries to you who understand your needs. Though you do not know us, we cherish you. Seth is a point in my reference, in our reference. He is an ancient portion of us. We are separate but united. Always the Spirit forms the flesh." That's the end of that session. We'll continue on. Session 589. We will continue. There are kinds of consciousness, and this is Seth speaking. We will continue. There are kinds of consciousness that cannot be deciphered in physical terms. The personality who originated the paragraphs you have just read is such a one. As mentioned, there is the same kind of connection between that personality and myself as the one that exists between Rupert and myself. But in your terms, Seth too is far further divorced from my reality than I am from Rupert's. You could imagine Seth too as a future portion of me if you prefer, and yet far more is involved. I am myself using simple terms here to try and make these ideas clearer. In a trance state, Rupert can contact me. In a state in some ways similar to a trance, I can contact Seth too. We are related in ways quite difficult to explain, united in webs of consciousness. My reality includes then not only reincarnational identities, but also gestalts of being that do not necessarily have any physical connections. The same applies to each reader of this book. The soul is open-ended, therefore. It is not a closed spiritual or psychic system. I have tried to show you that the soul is not a separate, apart from you thing. It is no more divorced from you than with a capital God is. There is no need to create a separate God who exists outside of your universe and separate from it, nor is there any need to think of a soul as some distant entity. God, or all that is intimately a part of you. His energy forms your identity, and your soul is a part of you in the same manner. My own reincarnational personalities, probable selves, and even Seth too, exist within me now as I exist within them. In your terms, Seth too is more advanced. In your terms, he is more alien, since he cannot relate to your physical existence as well as I do, because of my background in it. Still, my experience enriches Seth too, and his experience enriches me, to the extent that I am able to perceive and translate them for my own use. In the same way, Rupert's personality is expanded through relationship with me, and I also gain through experience, as even the best of teachers learns from each dimension of activity. In larger terms, my soul includes my reincarnational personalities, Seth too, and probable selves. I am as aware of my probable selves, incidentally, as I am of my reincarnational existences. Your concept of the soul is simply so limited. I am not really speaking in terms of group souls, though this interpretation can also be made. Each part of the soul contains the whole, a concept I am sure will startle you. As you become more aware of your own subjective reality, you will therefore become familiar with greater portions of your own soul. When you think of the soul as a closed system, you perceive it as such, and close off from yourself the knowledge of its greater creativity and characteristics. Seth too does represent what I will become to some extent, and in your terms, yet when I become what he is, he will be something different. In the same terms now, only Rupert may become what I am, but then I will be something far different. Each of you are involved in the same kind of relationships, whether or not you are aware of them. Though it seems to you that reincarnational existences involve past and future events, they are existences parallel or adjacent to your own present life and consciousness. Other aspects of your greater identity exist, relatively speaking, about or around these. The answers to the nature of reality, the intimate knowledge of all that is that you all seek, is within your present experience, It will not be found outside of yourselves, but through an inner journey into yourself, through yourself, and through the world that you know. I was once a mother with 12 children, ignorant in terms of education, far from beautiful, particularly in later years, with a wild temper and a raucous voice. This was around Jerusalem in the 6th century. The children had many fathers. I did my best to provide for them. My name was Marshaba. We lived wherever we could, squatting in doorways and finally all begging. Yet in that existence, physical life had a contrast, a sharpness greater than any I had known. A crust of bread was far more delicious to me than any piece of cake, however well frosted, had ever been in lives before. When my children laughed, I was overwhelmed with delight. And despite our privations, each morning was a triumphant surprise that we had not died in our sleep, that we had not succumbed to starvation. I chose that life deliberately, as each of you choose each of yours. And I did so because my previous lives had left me too blasé. I was too cushioned. I no longer focused with clarity upon the truly spectacular physical delights and experiences that earth can provide. Though I yelled at my children and screamed sometimes in rage against the elements, I was struck through with the magnificence of existence and learned more about true spirituality than I ever did as a monk. This does not mean that poverty leads to truth or that suffering is good for the soul. Many who shared those conditions with me learned little. It does mean that each of you choose those life conditions that you have for your own purpose, knowing ahead of time where your weaknesses and strengths lie. In the gestalt of my personality, as in your terms, I lived later, richer lives. That woman was alive again in me, as, for example, the child is alive in the adult, and filled with gratitude, comparing later circumstances to the earlier existences. She urged me to use my advantages better. So in you, your various reincarnational existences in a large manner co-occur. Using the analogy of adulthood again, it is as if the child within you is a part of your own memory and experience, and yet in another way has left you, gone apart from you, as if you are only one adult that the child turned into. So the people that I have been have gone their own way and yet are a part of me, and I of them. I am alive in Seth II's memory as a self from which he sprang. Yet the self I am now is not the self from which he sprang. Only your rigid ideas of time and consciousness make these statements seem strange to you. For in a larger context again, I can remember Seth II. All of these connections, therefore, are open. All psychological events affect all others. If you do not understand something, clearly mention it, because if you do not, then the reader will not. And he was talking to Rupert and Joseph, so that this would be clear. All of existence and consciousness is interwoven. Only when you think of the soul as something different, separate, and therefore closed are you led to consider a separate God, a personality that seems to be apart from creation. All that is a part of creation, but more than what creation is. There are pyramid gestalts of being impossible to describe, whose awareness includes knowledge and experience of what would seem to be you, a vast number of other realities. In the terms of which I am speaking for your benefit, their present might, for example, include the life and death of your planet in a moment of their time. Seth II's existence is at the outside fringes of one such galaxy of consciousness. When Seth II speaks, Rupert initially is aware of the following. His consciousness strains upward, following an inner psychic pathway, an energized funnel, until quite simply it can go no further. It seems to him that his consciousness goes out of his body through an invisible pyramid whose open top stretches far up into space. Here he seems to make contact with impersonal symbols whose message is somehow automatically translated into words. That point actually represents a warp in dimensions, a place between systems that has far more to do with energy and psychological reality than it has to do with space, for space is meaningless. I am almost always present as a translator at such times. My knowledge of both realities is necessary for the communication. SETH too is familiar with an entirely different set of symbols and meanings, so that in this case 2 translations are being given, one by me and one by Rupert. Hopefully, certain concepts will be delivered in this way that could not be delivered otherwise. These minglings of reality and experience, these messages from one system to another, occur in various ways continually, emerging in your world in one guise or another as inspiration of many kinds. You are being helped, in other words. You are also using your own abilities, however, for your own characteristics largely determine the amount of help you receive. The symbolism apparent to Rupert when SETH 2 speaks works well, but outward is also inward. And so consciousness travels as far inward as it seems to him to go outward. Such contacts and knowledge are available to each individual. All that is speaks to all of its parts, not with sounds, trumpets, and fanfare from without, but communicates its messages through the living soul stuff of each consciousness. And that is the end of that session. We'll stop there. All right. There is so much here. Important part of the subject of what is here has to do with SETH 2. Okay, a whole nother personality coming through and speaking. So while SETH was describing to us his own multidimensional aspects, he wanted us to know, yes, and there's even a SETH 2 that can come through. So even SETH 2 is giving us energy and helping us, and a lot of it's based on joy and exaltation, all of this wonderfulness of life. So within that context, there are so many statements, and I think I can't narrow it down. So I'm going to do more than one. Right now we'll just read some of them. The soul is open-ended. Each part of the soul contains the whole. The answers to the nature of reality, the intimate knowledge of all that is that you all seek, is within your present experience. It will be found through an inner journey into yourself, through yourself, and through the world that you know. All psychological events affect all others. All that is speaks to all of its parts and communicates its messages through the living soul stuff of each consciousness. All right, so that is quite a bit. We could try to combine them. They fall into 2 categories, talking about what the soul is, and then talking about how all that is communicates to us. All right. So, we might need to do a little bit of work here to put these together. Let's think about this. Under the soul, we have open-ended. Okay, the soul is open-ended. So my soul is open-ended. That's one thing. My soul contains the whole. Okay, that's another. And then we go on to all that is found through an inner journey through myself and through the world I know. All that is found by an inner journey through myself and the world I know. And another one, all psychological events affect all others. All psychological events affect all others. And another one, all that is speaks to all of its parts. All that is speaks to all of its parts. And then all that is communicates its messages through the living soul stuff of each consciousness. All that is communicates its messages through the living soul stuff of each consciousness. So, my soul is open-ended. My soul contains the whole. All that is found by an inner journey through myself and the world I know. All psychological events affect all others. All that is speaks to all of its parts. All that is communicates its message through the living soul stuff of each consciousness. And this is all coming out of SETH Speaks, chapter 22, session 589, although we started earlier. And today's date is July 21st, 2015. Okay, and we'll have a closing prayer. Oh, thank you for all of this information. May we understand on a deep level what we are being taught. I'll even include in this prayer a simple exercise. For the next few moments, we will each personally imagine within our own environment here, including ourselves, the feelings that we're having, and have that multiplied by everyone else that's in the room and the area where we are, and believing that everything has an aliveness and a sacredness of which we are a part of, and knowing that this moment that we are connecting to right now, we will imagine it, that each other person right now on the planet, billions, 6, 7, 8, 9 billion people are experiencing this same wonderful aliveness. And this is just beginning to touch and hint at the overwhelming beauty of life that we have been given, that only includes this moment on the inhabitants of earth. There is past life, future lives, probable lives, other entities of other systems. Infinite amount of entities, beings, dimensions, and communication occurring right now. As we expand our abilities to understand, thank you for giving us the strength and comfort of knowing that we are not alone, that we are a part of all that is, and all that is a part of me, and that I am my soul, and I am connected to everything. May this love spill over to all those in my hearts and minds, now harm-free. In the name of Jesus, amen.